Chapter 15, March 22nd, the hike in North Carolina. Miles hiked today, 11. Total miles hiked on the Appalachian Trail, about 160. Weather, blizzard. Although we were still not averaging more than 10 miles a day, I was starting to feel really good. I couldn't tell if the constant aches in my muscles had really lessened or if I had just gotten used to them. My feet were tough. I rarely had a blister. I woke and ate and hiked and ate, hiked and ate and slept, and then did it all over again the next day. I didn't think about much, but I felt good. Mom quit longing for the newspapers. Even when we had a chance, neither of us called Dad. A few days after Nantahala, we stopped for lunch at a shelter called Cable Gap. We usually ate cold food for lunch, apples and peanut butter and stuff like that, because it was too much trouble to dig the stove and pots out of our packs. Today, though, it was pretty cold, and Mom wanted tea, and while she crouched beside the stove, waiting for the water to boil, I leafed through the trail register. This time, Beagle had written more. All days are hard, but some are harder than others. Is Maine still part of the plan? Good night, Katahdin, wherever you are. Of course it is, I thought. Maine was always part of the plan. I picked up the register's pen and leafed forward to an open space, and I wrote, "The trail is the same, but the walk gets easier. Katahdin." There, I thought. It was a nice counterpoint. That afternoon, it began to snow. At first, I was full enough to think it was kind of fun. We were in a place called Walker Gap, nearly 3 miles past the lunch shelter and just over 4 miles from Fontana Dam, where Mom said we would find a pretty decent hostel with hot showers. Hot anything sounded good. I'd woken up cold and been chilly most of the morning. Now, between the wind and the wet, sleety snow, I couldn't seem to get warm. Mom looked at the heavy clouds, and she looked at our map. Then she looked at me. "This won't be easy," she said. "It's downhill all the way." People think hiking downhill should be easier than hiking up, but it's not. Your heart pounds going uphill, but the rest of your body pounds going downhill. Your toes pound in the front of your boots, and all your other bones pound into each other. It hurts after a quarter of a mile, and soon you're wishing for a nice, steep cliff to climb. Also, you don't fall uphill, or if you do, you're not so likely to slide off the mountain while doing it. With icy mud underfoot and my pack pushing against my back and shoulders, my hands shaking from the cold, and my toes going numb, I started to feel I was teetering on the edge of disaster with every single step. Reach, slide, grab, rebalance. Reach, slide, grab, rebalance. As I grew clumsier, I grew slower. And as I grew slower, I grew colder and clumsier. Mom was in front of me. She turned and looked over her shoulder. "You okay?" "I'm cold," my teeth chattered. The sky was dark and heavy. It clung to the mountainside like a thick, wet blanket. Wet snow stuck sideways to the branches and trunks of the trees. It had started to accumulate on the trail itself. My boots were wet through. I wondered how we'd get down this stretch once the rocks were covered. Mom stood still while I made my way to her. "What clothes do you have that you aren't wearing?" I blinked at her. "One shirt, socks, a pair of shorts." I was wearing my thermal underwear and my fleece, and a hat and gloves. "Put the shirt on. I'm going to find some sticks for us to use as hiking poles. We need to eat something too." By the time I'd gotten my pack off, my shirt on, and my pack back on, she was back with 4 big sticks. I rested my weight against one. It snapped in 2 pieces. I looked down at the piece still in my hand. My mother laughed. "Sucky day," she said. "We'll get through it." "Want a Pop-Tart?" I asked. I threw the broken stick into the snow. "You bet." I cannot say for sure how we made it down that mountain. Within 20 minutes of our stop, I felt twice as miserable as before. I fell once, ripping my thermal pants across the knee and bruising my knee, too. Mom kept on, faster than I wanted her to go. My teeth were chattering, and I really wanted to stop again, put up our stove, and make something hot to drink. When I said so, Mom shook her head. We're too wet. We'll freeze if we don't keep going, she said. I knew she was right, but I didn't want her to be right. I knew we needed to keep moving, but I wanted her to slow down. I knew I had no reason to be angry with her, not that day at least, but I was. Then she fell. On the trail below me, I saw her stumble, try to catch herself, and roll forward in what seemed like slow motion. The trail followed the ridgeline, and she went right over the side of the mountain, rolling and crashing into trees. She didn't shout. She came to a stop and didn't move. I threw myself forward, skidding, sliding, fighting to keep upright and still run down the slope. When I reached her, she was on her stomach in the snow, her face turned a little to one side. I'm not hurt, she said. Are you sure? I asked. My heart pounded. No, she said, but I think so, except I can't get up. She landed stomach down with her feet uphill, her pack on top of her, and her arms and legs tangled in the sodden underbrush. I helped her roll over and stand up. She was scraped and filthy. Blood trickled down the side of her face, and when she took a step, she winced. Is it bad? I asked. I can't tell yet, she said. She picked up her walking stick and took another step, and another. Not horrible, she said. We climbed back onto the trail. Not good, she admitted. Her lips were blue and she was shaking. And now I'm really wet, she added. I pulled out the map and tried to guess where we were. Long way yet, I said. Let's go. Now it was my turn to push, my turn to lead. Mom gritted her teeth and kept walking. I stayed just in front of her. I made her swallow some water and eat a candy bar. I kept careful watch for the white blazes that marked the trail. I checked the map, and I decided when we could rest for a moment and when we had to move on. Mom looked awful, and the sky was getting darker. The nearest shelter was still 2 miles away, but at the end of an unholy mountain was a road, US 28. I tried to remember what day of the week it was and wondered if anyone would be out driving in the snow. Mom's eyes were looking glassy, and I couldn't feel my feet. I thought we needed to get under shelter, and soon. Finally, the road. I made Mom take off her pack and sit on it, and I laid my own pack against her to shield her from the snow. After a moment, I unlashed my sleeping bag and draped it over her. She had stopped shivering, which was not a good sign. I was shivering so hard I felt my eyeballs were bouncing loose. Not a good sign either. A solitary car swung around the bend in the road. I stuck out my shaking thumb. The car kept going, then braked hard, its wheels sliding on the wet road. It turned around. It pulled up next to us, and the driver inside reached over to open the passenger door. She looked out. Lord, you're not through hikers, she said. Get in. I helped Mom heave her pack into the back seat. The car was an old one with wide bench seats. Mom and I crowded into the front seat where the heater was. I was still shivering. Mom looked blue. The woman driving didn't seem put off by our sodden filthiness. She turned the heater up full blast. Wait a minute, she said. She got out and rummaged through the trunk and came back with an armful of old towels that smelled like dog pee. Wipe yourselves dry, she said. It'll be about 15-minute drive in this weather. But the shelter's that way, I said, pointing over my shoulder in the direction she had originally been driving. The woman shook her head. I'm not taking you to a shelter tonight, she said. Not in the shape you're in. Your mom's too cold. You know that. I nodded. So the woman smacked her lips and nodded once hard. I'm taking you to the Hike Inn. My mom stirred a little and smiled. The Hike Inn. It's still there? Yep, said the driver. Said Mother. Trail magic. Trail magic is when you stumble toward a road crossing after a long afternoon of uphill climbs and find that someone, you'll never know who, had left a cooler full of cold sodas and fresh fruit there, with a sign telling you to help yourself. Trail magic is people seeing you in a town with a full pack on your back and offering you a ride back to the trail. And trail magic is when an untidy woman finds you at the end of the scariest afternoon of your life and takes you to a place that's safe and warm. The hike in was like heaven after that day. By the time we got there, Mom had started to shake, and the woman driving us wouldn't leave us until she had seen Mom safely into a room, lying down, swathed in blankets with hot water bottles. Our water bottles filled with the hot water from the tap at her feet and hands, and the room furnace running full tilt. "You take care of yourselves now," she said, cupping my chin in her brown hands. "Stay here until the snow melts. Don't be fools. And have fun." Then she tucked a piece of paper into my hands and walked out into the snow. The paper was a business card. Mandy Dennis, attorney at law. I put it into my pack next to Springer's shirt. I stripped my wet clothes off and took the hottest shower I could stand. When I got out of the shower, Mom was sleeping. Her cheeks and lips were pink again, and she looked okay. I found another blanket in the closet and tucked it around her, then put on the driest clothes I had, still pretty wet, bundled all the rest of our clothes with the hotel towels, and hauled the bundles down the hall in search of a washing machine and food. There had to be hot food somewhere. There were laundry machines, and the desk clerk told me there wasn't a restaurant, but there was a pizza delivery service. And when I called, they promised to bring 3 large pizzas with everything right away. And there was Vivi. I couldn't believe it. The clerk had just finished saying, "Honey, how's your mama?" when I looked up and I saw her coming down the hall. My mouth must have dropped open a foot. "Danny," Vivi said, "what happened? Do you need help?" She rushed over and put her arms around me. I was so relieved not to be alone anymore that I burst into tears. Vivi held me tight. Vivi came back to our room and agreed with me that Mom looked all right. "Hypothermia is dangerous business," she said. "You did a good job. You handled it well." I shook my head. It could have been so much worse. If that attorney hadn't been so good to us. My voice trailed off. Vivi pushed the curtain back from the window. We were sitting at the little table by the door eating pizza. Vivi had already eaten but was glad to have just a little more. We had saved one whole pizza in its box for Mom. Vivi said, "This is nasty bad weather. I hope everybody got off the mountains." I took a swig of the Coke I had bought out of the machine. I felt almost cozy. Vivi had lent me dry socks and a fleece sweatshirt so I could put mine in the washer. "Why is everybody so helpful?" I asked. "You mean on the trail or in general?" asked Vivi. "On the trail," I said. "Mom and I hardly talk to people, but they're still so nice to us. At home, we don't even talk to our neighbors, except Mom's friend Nancy. When Springer died, they didn't even know." Vivi answered slowly, "I think out here we're more aware of how much we need each other. If I abandon you today when you need help, maybe someone else will abandon me tomorrow. But if I take care of you, then you can take care of someone else, or someone else might take care of me. It's a community of strangers," she said, "a neighborhood that extends 2,000 miles. At night, I dreamed Springer and I were running races in the grass. The field was wide and full of yellow dandelions. The sun was warm and the air smelled sweet. I was wearing my sundress with red poppies on it, my favorite dress when I was 4 years old. Springer wore his soccer uniform, blue shirt, black shorts. We were running across the grass, racing, laughing. He stumbled and fell, and I ran into Daddy's arms, yelling, "I won again! I won again!" Springer got up, a puzzled look on his face, and said, "Why do I keep falling down?" My mother glanced at my father quickly, then looked away. I knew something was wrong. It wasn't really a dream. It was a memory. The next day, Mom took Springer to the doctor, and the day after that was his 6th birthday. And the day after that, we took a long ride to Knoxville Children's Hospital, and they told us Springer had Duchenne's. A nurse led me down the hall to get a special lollipops out of a big glass bowl. I chose carefully. One for me, one for Springer. I remember thinking that the right flavor of the lollipop would make Springer better. I was really stupid then. I woke up in a dark room and I found that I was leaning against my mother. Her breathing was soft and regular, her body warm. I snuggled closer to her and went back to sleep.